equity, where 75% of all European private equity business is now based here in the UK. Or in my industry, hedge funds, where 80% of European business is based here in the UK. Our fund managers easily compete with Switzerland as a place of expertise. We host the European head offices of almost all the major investment banks. We have the Lloyd's insurance markets and some of the best-known insurance brands, Aviva, Prudential and Legal & General. British innovation, skill and entrepreneurship, backed by a free government independently minded from Europe, choosing its own regulation and direction, gave that industry its boost. Is it any wonder that Europe is jealous and envious of our success? And it's because of our nation's ability to face up to a crisis that I am confident our success stories of the 80s will be repeated again. But that is not the view shared by Europe or the European Commission. They do not see the rationale in allowing our own national government to take stock of current world conditions and make our own decisions. No, they know best. They believe only they can solve the problems today and the recession. They believe they can only do so in the way they know how to, by creating directive after directive and throwing them at the markets to digest. So let me give you some examples of what they're trying to do to destroy our British industry. They're proposing establishing a European system of financial supervisors, which President Barroso states will establish a more efficient, integrated and sustainable financial regulator to prevent financial crashes in the future. Do not be fooled, ladies and gentlemen, by the cosy language or laudable objectives. This is no ordinary directive. It creates an effective European super-regulator, an Uber regulator. It will have a European securities regulator based in Paris, to which the Bank of England and the FSA will have to report into. It will have a European pensions regulator based in Frankfurt and a European banking regulator based in London. Thank for small mercies. It will have the power to recommend new pan-European regulations and have all of Europe's regulators report into them. Barroso believes this Uber regulator can stop financial crises in the future. If the SEC, the FSA, and all the world's regulators were unable to spot it and stop it, what's going to allow a new Uber regulator on top of them to be able to come up with the solutions? We know it's rubbish. We know it's not true. This is not about efficiency. It's about control. Control of our financial services industry. The Commission also proposes the Alternative Investment Fund Management Directive, the so-called AIFM Directive. Mention those simple four letters to city professionals, and quite possibly some other four-letter words may be mentioned in the same sentence. Again, the Commission states that alternative investment funds need to be regulated more in order to prevent systemic financial meltdown. Those funds are like the private equity and hedge funds I mentioned earlier, mainly based here in the UK. This directive gives the European Commission the right to control in certain circumstances the amount of capital, lending and borrowing a firm can do. It gives the European Commission to ban European investors from investing in funds that are not domiciled in Europe or managed by Europeans, whilst also banning them from marketing to Europe. That means stopping you from investing any fund outside of Europe that you choose. It places rules on remuneration and gives restrictions on a whole host of important business decisions. It's a charter to send British business abroad. And why is it dangerous, ladies and gentlemen? Just over a decade ago in the UK, we did not have significant dominance in the market in private equity and hedge funds. Today, they directly employ 40,000 people and provide £5.3 billion in tax to the UK Exchequer. That's 200,000 nurses, 45,000 hospital consultants, 145,000 teachers. In just 2 years, the tax raised from these two sectors alone would be enough to pay for the whole of the 2012 Olympics. But the cost is estimated as between £1.2 and £1.6 billion in its first year. The directive is not aimed at preventing future crisis. It's an attack on British business. It's about control of our financial services industry. And those two directives, horrid as they are are amongst many being promulgated by the European Commission. They are issuing directives on insurance companies' capital, directives on derivatives markets, directives to sanction financial services companies, directives on credit reference agencies, directive upon directive upon directive. The European Parliament even approved legislation recently to provide the US security services with access to European citizens' financial transactions above €99 without approval by a judge. Every transaction, every time you go to Tesco's, will now be able to be seen by the CIA and any US security services for any reason they want whatsoever. All these directives, ladies and gentlemen, are said to improve markets and their stability, but we know it's about control of our financial services. The European project is being run by a small group of people with vested interest to keep themselves in a job when all of us are worried about ours. Where we should be concerned about creating jobs and turning our economy around, we are mired in over-regulation of questionable value. There are those who say we must maintain intelligent skepticism about Europe. We must engage in Europe and work with them to maintain our global influence, project jobs and national securities. Well, I ask you, what use is this doctrine when we clearly cannot influence Europe not to introduce directives which damage one of our most important industries? Would the French have allowed their farming sector to be damaged and attacked in the same way? Would the Germans have allowed their engineering? The Italians their fashion? Not at all. It's just ourselves, and we are standing quiet. What use is this doctrine if our engagement results in jobs being lost in the UK and businesses moving to our competitor nations? Europe has no interest in protecting our financial services industry. They want it for themselves. They want to grab the power, the wealth, the tax, and the ability to pay for their hospitals from ourselves. And whilst the European Commission damages our national interests through over-regulation, increasing costs, we are mindful that not all Europeans support their agenda. We are friends of Europe, not its enemies. We must trade with Europe and continue to do so. 3 million jobs in the UK and 4 million jobs in Europe are dependent upon it. We are also conscious that every day the world grows smaller and more competitors enter the marketplace. We no longer have to do battle with the US, Europe and Switzerland. We face greater challenges from Brazil, Russia, India and China and other nations that wish to develop their financial services industries. This is a time. In order to succeed, we need to draw upon all our nation's skills, the energy of its people, the entrepreneurial spirit, drive and enthusiasm of our risk-takers. We must support its creativity and inventiveness. We must free them from the burden of the European directives and the European Commission. And when we do, we can once again take charge of the direction that we want our businesses to develop. Above all, we must champion our champions, not shackle them with the weight of regulation and indifference. We must set them free and make our decisions for our own growth. Because, ladies and gentlemen, when we do, like in the 1980s and 90s, our financial services industries and many more will once again be in the vanguard of the businesses that help us lead us out of this testing time. Thank you.